Have you ever felt the weight of a room before anyone said a single word, walked into a space and instantly sensed the tension, the sorrow, the invisible storm hiding behind someone's polite smile? That's not coincidence. That's not overthinking. That's being an empath. An empath isn't just a kind person or someone who listens well. An empath absorbs. They feel emotions as if they were their own, even when those emotions don't belong to them. Their nervous system is wired like an emotional antenna, picking up subtleties others never notice, registering energies that can't be explained with logic. This gift is beautiful, but beauty, without boundaries, often becomes a wound. Because when you feel everything, you also carry everything. You carry the sadness people never say, the anger they suppress, the chaos they hide behind a calm voice. And if you don't know what's yours and what isn't, you start bleeding from wounds that were never yours to begin with. That's the empath's dilemma. They shine so brightly they forget their light isn't meant to light the entire world. It's meant to illuminate their path first. The world doesn't teach you how to protect this sensitivity. Instead, it praises your selflessness, your generosity, your emotional availability. And before you know it, your gift becomes your cage. You find yourself in relationships where you're always the listener, never the speaker, always the healer, never the healed. You keep pouring from your soul, hoping someone will notice you're running dry. But no one does, because you never say it. And the moment you do, you feel guilty, as if having needs somehow contradicts your nature. But here's what no one tells you. Empathy without awareness becomes emotional self-destruction. Feeling deeply isn't the problem. Forgetting yourself in the process is. Jung once said that those who look outside dream, but those who look inside awaken. For the empath, looking inside isn't optional, it's survival. Because if you don't learn to separate your light from someone else's darkness, you will burn out trying to save people who never asked to be saved. And worse, you'll start calling that exhaustion love. But it's not love, it's a silent cry for rescue that only you can answer, and it begins with one decision: to feel without losing yourself. There's a part of you you've never met, not because it doesn't exist, but because you were taught to hide it. That part is your shadow. Carl Jung didn't describe the shadow as evil, he called it unconscious. It's everything you've repressed, ignored, denied, or buried so deeply that even you forgot it was there. Your anger, your envy, your need to be seen. The parts of you you were told were too much, too intense, or not nice. But just because you ignore them doesn't mean they disappear. No, they grow stronger in the dark. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And that's the truth that most empaths avoid. Because to confront your shadow is to admit that you too are capable of harm, that your compassion has a breaking point, that your kindness, if unchecked, can turn into martyrdom. And maybe that's the hardest truth of all, that the light you give others is only half the story. The other half lives in silence, in dreams, in sudden anger you can't explain, in attraction to people who only take and never give. For the empath, the shadow is especially dangerous not because it's evil, but because it's disguised. You think you're helping someone out of love, but you're really trying to feel needed. You think you're forgiving someone endlessly, but you're really afraid of confrontation. And all the while, the parts of you that want to scream, say no, set boundaries, they sit in the shadow, suffocating under your need to be good. But what if goodness isn't the goal? What if wholeness is? Because the shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It manifests through patterns, through toxic relationships, through the exhaustion that never leaves. And until you face it, you'll keep attracting mirrors that reflect what you've refused to see. Your light draws people in, but it's your shadow that chooses who stays. The wounds you ignore are the ones they'll press. The needs you suppress are the ones they'll exploit. And the moment you embrace your shadow not as something to fix, but as something to integrate, you begin to reclaim your power. Because the most dangerous empath isn't the one who only radiates love. It's the one who sees clearly in the dark and loves anyway, without losing themselves to it. There's something about your presence, something warm, soft, and unguarded. You walk into a room and it shifts, not because you demand attention, but because your energy speaks before you do. It's compassion without condition. It's openness without expectation. And that kind of energy is so rare, in fact, that it doesn't just attract the wounded, it attracts the dangerous. Empaths don't just shine, they glow. And in a world starved of genuine connection, that glow becomes a beacon. But light, by its very nature, draws in everything: the lost, the curious, and yes, the dark. It's a truth few empaths are ready to hear. Because while you offer love freely, there are those who see that as an invitation to consume, not out of malice, always. Sometimes it's unconscious, sometimes it's instinct. Like moths to a flame, some people will come closer just to feed on what you radiate: your calm, your care, your certainty. These aren't always villains in obvious disguise. No black cloaks, no warning signs. Often they come wounded, fragile, full of unhealed ache. They come as broken souls wearing soft voices. They don't ask for your help outright, they draw it out of you, silently, with every look, every silence, every emotional void you feel compelled to fill. And because you're you, because your first instinct is to give, you open the door. But that's where the danger begins. Because light doesn't always heal. Sometimes it blinds. Sometimes your radiance doesn't make them better. It just reveals how little light they carry on their own. And instead of rising to meet your love, they sink deeper into their shadows and pull you with them. Not because you failed, but because you tried to heal what wasn't ready. What no one teaches empaths is this: not everyone attracted to your light has good intentions. Some are drawn not to your soul, but to the shelter your soul provides. You offer them warmth, and they bring in cold. You offer them trust, and they offer you wounds. And you stay because you believe in their potential. But belief, without boundaries, becomes self-betrayal. Remember this: your light is sacred. And if it keeps calling in darkness, maybe it's time to ask, what is it in me that still believes I have to save everyone who walks through my glow? They meet like magnets, silent, sudden, irresistible. On one side, the empath, overflowing with warmth, eager to heal, to hold, to understand. On the other, the narcissist, charming, magnetic, and broken in places so deep they no longer feel them. It looks like chemistry, it feels like fate. But beneath the surface, something else is happening, something Jung understood deeply, a psychological dance between predator and prey, cloaked in the illusion of love. The narcissist doesn't wear a mask to deceive, they wear it to survive. Their entire identity is shaped around illusion, confidence built on emptiness, connection built on control. They crave attention, validation, worship not because they feel powerful, but because they feel nothing at all. And then the empath appears, glowing, receptive, unquestioning. To the narcissist, it's not attraction, it's opportunity. Jung spoke of the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine within all of us, and how projection pulls us into relationships that mirror what we deny in ourselves. The empath sees in the narcissist someone to help, to fix, to love into healing. But what they're really doing is trying to heal the wounded part inside themselves, the part that feels responsible for everyone else's happiness. And the narcissist? They see in the empath the emotional food they've been starving for. Not because they want to grow, but because they want to feed. The narcissist doesn't love, they mirror. They study the empath, reflect back their dreams, their desires, their values. They become everything the empath has longed for until the moment control is established. Then comes the devaluation, the confusion, the gaslighting, and the empath, so used to fixing, digs in deeper, believing love means enduring. Believing pain means purpose. But here's the warning. What feels like passion can be pathology. What feels like healing can be harm. Because narcissists don't need love, they need supply. And empaths, if unaware of their own shadow, will keep giving until there's nothing left. They don't see the danger at first, because their own unhealed wounds make the toxicity feel familiar. And this is where Jung's wisdom becomes vital. Until the empath turns inward, faces their own need to be needed, they will keep walking into the same fire, thinking they're the water. But you're not water. You're the flame. And you were never meant to burn yourself to warm someone who refuses to hold their own light. There's a reason you're so good at understanding pain. You've lived it. You've swallowed silence. You've felt the sting of being too sensitive in a world that doesn't know how to hold depth. And instead of becoming bitter, you became better. You chose love, presence, compassion. But underneath that strength, there's often a forgotten ache. The one you tucked away when you told yourself, "I'll help others so they never feel what I felt." That's not weakness. That's the path of the wounded healer. Carl Jung spoke of the wounded healer as an archetype, the one who heals others because they themselves are wounded. But here's the warning. If the healer never turns inward, if they never tend to their own wounds, their healing becomes projection. It becomes a mission. It becomes sacrifice. And that's when the doors open wide to emotional vampires. Because when you're more comfortable fixing others than facing your own pain, you attract those who love to be fixed, not healed fixed, over and over again. They come with chaos and call it vulnerability. They bring you pain and call it honesty. And you, because you see their hurt, confuse it for depth. But not every scar is an invitation, and not every broken person wants to be whole. Some are just looking for a host. Emotional vampires don't take your kindness with gratitude. They take it with hunger. And the more you give, the more they consume. You become their comfort, their compass, their crutch. And while you bleed yourself dry, they barely notice. Why? Because they didn't come to love you. They came to be fed by you. You think love means staying, enduring, being the one who never gives up. But what if I told you that the first person you're meant to heal is you? What if your compulsive need to rescue others is just an echo of the child who needed rescuing and never got it? Until you sit with that child, until you hold them, see them, let them grieve, you will keep playing nurse to people who enjoy being sick, not because they're evil, but because it serves them. And until you break that cycle, your empathy won't be healing, it will be self-erasure. Jung warned. The healer must confront their own shadow, or risk becoming lost in someone else's darkness. You don't owe your light to those who refuse to find their own flame, especially when your own fire is still flickering. You don't just see the best in people, you feel it, even when they can't, even when they've buried it beneath years of trauma, shame, or survival. You look at them, and you don't just see who they are, you see who they could be. And because your soul is wired for compassion, you don't walk away. You stay, you pour love into potential. You give and give and give. But here's the danger. When you're not fully conscious of your own needs, your own worth, your own shadow, what you're really doing is projecting. Carl Jung once said, "We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life." That's not just poetry, that's warning. Because projection is the mind's way of placing what's inside us onto someone else. When we don't claim our own light, we project it onto others and mistake it for theirs. When we don't confront our own pain, we romanticize it in someone else and call it connection. And before we know it, we're not loving the person, we're loving the version of ourselves we've cast upon them. Empaths do this unconsciously. They confuse compassion with clairvoyance. They think feeling someone's sadness means understanding their soul. But often they're just seeing their own inner child reflected back, the same ache, the same longing to be chosen, to be safe, to be enough. And in that reflection they merge, slowly, quietly, until their sense of self is no longer clear, until they begin to speak softer, move smaller, sacrifice more just to keep the illusion alive. This merging feels like love, but it isn't. It's fusion, and fusion erases boundaries. It's why you excuse red flags, why you stay when you know you're being drained. Because walking away feels like betrayal, not of them, but of the version of you that hoped this time would be different. But here's the truth. No one deserves to be the screen for your projections, and you don't deserve to lose yourself in someone else's story. The work is to pull those projections back in, to ask, What am I really seeing? Theme or my own reflection? Jung knew that what remains unconscious will rule your life, and you'll call it fate. But fate can be changed once you stop mistaking your light for someone else's. They don't show up with horns or warnings. They come wrapped in sweetness, softness, urgency. They look like someone who finally sees you, someone who listens, leans in, makes you feel important. It starts fast, too fast. That's not love. That's love bombing. Intensity mistaken for intimacy, compliments poured like honey until you forget to notice the pressure. And when you're hooked, when your nervous system has adjusted to the high, they pull away. Suddenly, silence, distance, coldness. And you, the empath, think, what did I do wrong? This is the trap. They know you want to be good, to be kind, to make things work, so they feed on that. Guilt tripping becomes a weapon. I guess I was just expecting too much. I didn't think you'd react like that. And you, being sensitive, internalize it. You blame yourself. You try harder. You apologize even when you're the one who's hurting. Then comes the victim card. They twist the narrative so masterfully that suddenly they're the ones who've been wounded. You're too cold, too distant, too demanding. Never mind that you've bent over backwards, lost sleep, ignored your intuition just to keep peace. They don't want peace, they want power. And when they don't get it, they retreat into silent treatment and invisible punishment designed to make you chase, question, self-correct. This isn't conflict. This is control. These tactics are not random, they're precision strikes aimed at the most sacred parts of you. Your empathy, your loyalty, your need to be enough. You think, if I love more, they'll stop hurting me. But love isn't the issue, manipulation is. And the more you contort yourself to avoid discomfort, the more you become a puppet in someone else's emotional theater. Jung taught us that what we don't make conscious will control us. The manipulator thrives in that unconscious gap. They study your patterns, your fears, your desire to be chosen. They use them as keys to your cage. But here's the truth. You are not hard to love. You are just easy to use if you don't protect your light. And protecting it starts when you stop confusing cruelty for confusion and start seeing manipulation for what it is. Not a cry for love, but a strategy for dominance. There's a mask you wear, and you've worn it for so long you might think it's you. It looks like kindness, sounds like compassion, feels like peace, but underneath it, exhaustion, resentment. A quiet scream no one hears because the smile never slips. This is the personified face you show the world, and Carl Jung warned, the more we identify with the persona, the more we disconnect from the self. Empaths are especially vulnerable to this trap, because from a young age they learn that their value lies in making others feel good. They become the good one, the understanding child, the supportive friend, the forgiving partner, and every time they express anger, sadness, or a boundary, they're met with resistance. So they adjust, they shrink, they smile through it. They perfect the performance until it becomes second nature. But here's the danger. When your identity becomes your mask, your soul goes silent. You say yes when your body screams no. You give when you're running on empty. You show up for everyone but disappear from yourself, and the world applauds. Because the persona is polite, accommodating, easy to digest, but beneath the surface, you're eroding, slowly, quietly, tragically. Jung believed that true healing begins when we shed the mask not because the persona is bad, but because it's incomplete. It's survival, not selfhood. When you start living for how others see you, you forget how to see yourself. And this is the moment empaths lose their power, not when they feel too much, but when they fake too much. The mask protects, but it also imprisons. It keeps you safe from judgment, but it also keeps you distant from joy. And worst of all, it makes you believe that love must be earned through perfection. But real love begins when the persona cracks, when you say what you really feel, need what you really need, and stop apologizing for being whole. So if you feel numb, if you feel unseen, if you feel like you're disappearing behind your own performance, know this: you haven't failed. You've just over-identified with a role that was never meant to define you. Take off the mask, even if your hands shake, especially if your hands shake, because who you are without it is where the real healing begins. It starts subtly, a tone, a look, a dismissive laugh when you express concern. You're too sensitive. You're reading into things. Why do you always assume the worst? At first, you defend yourself. Then you explain. Then you question. And slowly, your inner compass so sharp, so tuned starts to falter. That's not miscommunication. That's gaslighting. And for empaths, it's devastating. Because your gift is your intuition. Your gut doesn't whisper, it knows. But dark personalities know how to twist that knowing into doubt. They take your clarity and make it confusion. They chip away at your sense of reality until you're no longer sure if the problem is them or you. This isn't an accident. It's a tactic, and it's one of the most dangerous ones there is. Empaths are especially at risk, not because they're weak, but because they care. Because when someone you love tells you you're overreacting, you believe them. You double-check yourself before checking the facts. You assume the fault is yours because you'd rather be wrong than be unfair. But that fairness becomes the very weapon used against you. Dark personalities don't want partners, they want mirrors. And the moment you stop reflecting what they want to see, they distort you. You start to apologize for things you didn't do. You soften truths to protect someone else's denial. You override your instincts just to avoid conflict. And each time you do, you move further from your center. Not because you're lost, but because someone taught you to doubt your own light. Jung warned us, the unconscious doesn't just live in our dreams, it plays out in our relationships. If you've never felt safe trusting yourself, you will attract those who reinforce that fear. They will gaslight your light until you forget you even had it. But here's the truth. Your intuition is not broken. It's just been buried under someone else's manipulation. The way back is simple but not easy. You stop explaining. You start observing. You notice how often you feel off but say nothing. That's your signal. That's your truth. That's your power trying to surface. You don't need permission to trust yourself again. You just need to remember, your light isn't a liability. It's your greatest protection. But only if you believe in it more than you believe in their lies. You don't want much. Just to help. Just to heal. Just to hold space for people when they need it most. But there's a fine line between compassion and collapse, and no one crosses it more quietly than the empath. You give, not for validation, but because it feels right, because your heart expands at the sight of someone else's pain, because loving deeply is your native language. But without boundaries, even love becomes a weapon you turn against yourself. Compassion without containment is not kindness, it's leakage. It's waking up tired, even after sleep. It's feeling anxious in places that used to feel safe. It's losing your appetite, your clarity, your reflection in the mirror. Because when you become everyone else's safe space, you forget to create one for yourself. You listen to their fears while suppressing your own. You make room for their rage while swallowing your sadness. You hold them while silently falling apart. And the worst part? They rarely notice. Because you've trained them not to. You've become so good at hiding your needs that no one thinks you have any. Jung believed that every virtue, taken to an extreme, becomes a vice. And unchecked compassion is no exception. It breeds codependency. It attracts chaos. It makes you a magnet for those who never plan to give, only to take. And slowly your identity begins to erode, not because anyone stole it, but because you handed it out in pieces, hoping someone might finally care enough to give something back. This isn't martyrdom. It's a trauma response dressed up as love. Somewhere along the way, you learn that your worth lives in your usefulness. That to matter, you must sacrifice. That love is proven through pain. But none of that is true. That's not compassion, that's survival. Boundaries don't make you less loving, they make your love sustainable. They draw a line between helping and hemorrhaging, between showing up and being swallowed. The cost of limitless empathy is your own disappearance. And the truth is, You don't have to lose yourself to love someone. You don't have to break to be seen. The people meant for you will never require you to bleed to prove you care. So let the walls risen not to keep people out but to keep you in, intact, whole, present, because the kind of compassion that heals others must start by healing you. There comes a point when the pain no longer teaches, it just repeats. When you've played every role, the savior, the forgiver, the listener, the healer, and you still feel hollow, that's not failure. That's the call to awaken, to stop performing empathy and start embodying wholeness. Jung called this process individuation, the path of becoming fully yourself. Not the self others admire, need, or manipulate, but the raw, integrated self that includes every part you were taught to suppress. Individuation is not about fixing your flaws. It's about owning them, about standing in your truth without flinching. For the empath, this is the only escape, because as long as you cling to being only the light, you will be hunted by your shadow. And that shadow holds everything you've disowned: your anger, your boundaries, your need for space, your right to say no without guilt. You've likely spent your life being told that anger is dangerous, that wanting is selfish, that strength is hard and cold, but that was never true. Those lies were meant to keep you soft, pliable, controllable. And now, your liberation begins the moment you say, "I get to be the whole damn storm." Jung believed that the journey inward is the only way out, because the external world will keep repeating the same dynamics until you confront what's drawing them in. Until you sit with your grief, your fury, your unmet needs and listen. Not to fix, not to judge, just to witness. That is healing, that is integration. This isn't a clean process. It's not polite. It may look like withdrawal, detachment, rebellion, but it's actually returning to yourself, piece by piece, wound by wound, choosing not to abandon any part of your truth, even the parts that don't sparkle. You are not here to be a lantern for everyone else while you burn down to ash. You are here to be whole. That means becoming both flame and fuel, both light and darkness. To know your shadow so intimately that no one can ever use it against you again. Because once you own your full self, the manipulations lose their grip, the patterns break, and the pain becomes purpose. Individuation isn't the end of empathy, it's the first time it's directed inward. And that changes everything. You've been told your light is kindness, gentleness, softness, that to be good is to avoid conflict, stay agreeable, keep everyone comfortable. But let me tell you something. Light is not innocence. Light is awareness. And until you understand that, you will keep confusing passivity with love and sacrifice with strength. True empathy is not sentimental, it is clear-eyed. It sees the wound and the weapon. It knows when someone is in pain, and also when that pain is being used as a weapon. And it refuses to confuse the two. This is where many empaths fall, believing that to be light is to never confront darkness. But that's not light, that's avoidance. Jung said that what you resist persists. And the truth is, when you avoid your shadow, when you refuse to see the full picture, you don't protect yourself, you blind yourself. You allow toxic dynamics to grow in the space where your clarity should be. You love blindly, hoping love will heal them. But love doesn't heal what awareness avoids, it only fuels the illusion. Your light must include discernment, the ability to say, "I see your pain, but I also see your patterns. I understand your story, but I will not be your casualty." That is real love. Because real love doesn't enable. It doesn't shrink in the face of truth. It holds space, yes, but it also holds line. The empath who wakes up, who sharpens their vision instead of just softening their heart, becomes a force of nature, no longer led by guilt, no longer defined by being the one who never gives up. They don't stop loving, they just start loving with boundaries, with depth, with the kind of awareness that says, "I see you and I see me too, and both deserve respect." You don't lose your light when you start setting limits, you amplify it, because the brightest light is the one that knows when to shine and when to shield, when to nurture and when to walk away. That's not harsh. That's wisdom. So no, light is not about being easy, soft, or selfless. Light is about truth. It's about standing in who you are, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it disrupts the illusion. Because love without clarity is not compassion, it's codependence. And your light was never meant to blind you, it was meant to show the way first for you, then for the world. There's a moment when everything changes. Not because someone saved you, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself. The empath who has faced their shadow is not softer. They are sharper, calmer, wiser. Not because they stopped feeling, but because they finally learned how to feel without drowning. This is the integrated empath. No longer naive, no longer available to everyone, no longer seduced by pain disguised as love. They've walked through the fire of projection, gaslighting, emotional exhaustion and come out clear. They don't absorb everything now. They discern. They feel deeply. But they don't confuse compassion with obligation. They can sit with your pain without losing touch with their own truth. And that, right there, is power. Jung taught that wholeness isn't about perfection. It's about integration. Bringing together the light and the shadow, the healer and the wounded, the giver and the one who finally learned how to receive. The integrated empath doesn't give to be needed, they give from fullness, and because of that, they are no longer prey. They are a mirror. They reflect, they challenge, they see. And in doing so, they don't rescue. You don't need to be rescued when you're seen with clarity. They relate. This version of you doesn't say yes to every cry for help. They ask, is this mine to carry? They pause. They listen to their body, their instincts, their knowing. And they trust it because they've earned it. Their intuition is no longer second-guessed. It's respected. Their space is no longer invaded. It's sacred. And their love? It's no longer currency. It's a gift, offered only where it can be held with care. The integrated empath has tasted burnout and turned it into boundary. They've felt the cost of unconscious giving and chosen to give from consciousness instead. They are no longer lit from desperation, they are lit from truth. And that light, it doesn't flicker for approval. It doesn't dim to keep others comfortable. It simply shines. This is who you are becoming. Not someone who feels less, but someone who feels wisely. Not someone who saves others at their own expense, but someone who chooses relationships where healing flows both ways. This is power not loud, not showy, but grounded, sovereign, and finally, free. You were taught that no was rejection, that it closed doors, ended love, made people leave. So you said yes, even when you wanted to scream, even when every part of you said stop. But what if I told you that no is sacred, that it's not a wall but a doorway to peace? Jung once said, boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. And that is the truth too many empaths forget. Because when your worth is built on being agreeable, saying no feels like betrayal. But it isn't. It's alignment. It's choosing truth over performance. It's making space not just for others, but finally, for yourself. No is not the opposite of love. It is the shape of real love. Because when you say no to what drains you, you say yes to what sustains you. You stop entertaining half-hearted connections. You stop explaining your intuition. You stop negotiating your energy like it's disposable. That's not selfish, that's spiritual maturity. Empaths often confuse availability with compassion. But being open to everyone isn't kindness, it's erosion. It's leaking time, attention, presence until there's nothing left for you. And who, exactly, does that serve? You don't need to justify your boundaries. You don't need a story, a crisis, or an apology. The moment something feels wrong, you can say no, softly, firmly, quietly. It doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, the most powerful no is the one that comes from calm certainty, not from anger, but from clarity. And here's what no one tells you. The right people won't punish your no. They will respect it, because they know it's not about rejection, it's about reverence, for your energy, your time, your life. And when you begin to live from that place, everything shifts. The emotional leeches fall away, the performative connections dissolve, and in their place, real intimacy, grounded love, mutual respect. You've spent your life softening edges. Now it's time to shape space, to say, this is where I end, and someone else begins. Not as a defense, but as a declaration, a sacred one. Because your no doesn't just protect you, it protects the kind of love you've been waiting your whole life to give. And finally, to receive. There's a cost to shining without awareness. A quiet price you pay every time you light the way for others while your own roots remain untended. Carl Jung warned of this. If you do not face your shadow, you will project it, or worse, you will be consumed by those who already live in theirs. Empaths are born to illuminate, but light without grounding becomes fire. It attracts everything, beauty, brilliance, but also hunger. Those who have not met their own darkness are drawn to your glow, not to bask in it, but to feed. And if you're not careful, your light will become their fuel, until you have nothing left but smoke. You want to save the world, to be the balm, the sanctuary, the safe place. But here's Jung's final warning. You cannot heal the world while abandoning yourself. Compassion is not immunity. Sensitivity is not protection. If you are not rooted in truth, you will be devoured by someone else's lies, because not everyone drawn to your warmth intends to honor it. Some come only to survive. And if your gift is not guarded, it becomes a portal for your undoing. This is not a call to harden, it's a call to anchor. To remember that love is not the absence of self, it is the presence of boundaries. That your empathy is sacred, but only if it is yours first. That shining is not enough. You must be stable in your light. You must know the shape of your own shadow so no one else can manipulate it. You must know when to pour and when to pause, when to open and when to walk away. Empaths who shine without shadow become prey. Empaths who integrate become powerful, not untouchable but unshakable, because they no longer give from fear or from the need to be chosen. They give from presence, from depth, from fullness. And that light, clear, calm consciousness is what the world truly needs. So here it is, the final truth. To protect your gift, you must first protect yourself, because your light is not infinite unless it is cared for. And your purpose will not reach its fullness until you understand this. Being everything to everyone is not love. It's a slow erasure. But being fully yourself, that is how you love, lead, and light the way, without losing the very soul you came here to share. This story was intense, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.